cell membrane in plants. And this thing is the cell membrane. And the cell membrane is the thing that decides what can go into the cell and what can go out of the cell. It's a barrier between the stuff that's inside and the stuff that's outside. That's not really the function of the cell wall. The cell wall is this big, thick thing. The cell wall is really there for structural support and to make sure that this cell doesn't burst, which is really more of a topic for our next unit. We'll discuss that then. So the cell membrane lies immediately against the cell wall in most plant cells. So the cell wall is on the outside and the cell membrane is inside. It's still in the periphery of the cell, but it's the cell wall is the part that's outside the cell membrane. So there are several different types of cell walls depending on the organism. If you remember all the types of living things that exist, there's bacteria. So every living thing is either a bacterium or, let's see, a protist. These are both single-celled organisms, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And let's see, there are fungi and plants and animals like you and me. So every single living thing is either a bacterium, a protist, a fungi, a plant, or an animal. So these are the categories of life. Bacteria all have cell walls, fungi all have cell walls, plants all have cell walls, no animals have cell walls, and protists are somewhere in between because protists are this huge category of all these funky different organisms. They're all eukaryotic. They are all single-celled except for the ones that aren't. But those don't have specialized tissues, so they're still kind of a simpler type of organism. Anyway, some of these have a cell wall and some of them don't, so I guess I can say yes and no to that category. So cell walls are found in plants. Every plant cell has a cell wall. Same with fungi and same with bacteria. The cell walls in plants are different than the ones in fungi, which are different from the ones in bacteria, but they all do have a cell wall. And then this, whoops, it should probably say some protists. There are many protists that have cell walls. So you can write in some protists. And so the opposite would be the ones that don't have cell walls. So animal cells and you can put some protist cells do not have cell walls. And if you think about an animal as something that can move around, which is what we are really, animal cells, we evolved from maybe single-celled organisms that were able to move around, and it would be cumbersome to have it would be difficult to move around if you had a cell wall. Okay, cell walls. Now we're going to look at the structure of cell walls a little bit from one organism to another of the type that so let me go backwards, out of plants, fungi, bacteria, and protists are so special because there's so many different kinds. We're just going to look at the cell walls of plants, fungi, and bacteria and see how they're different right now. So remember when we did biochemistry, we did the macromolecules. Remember how there were carbs, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids? And do you remember with carbs, carbohydrates? Remember how we looked at the polysaccharides, the big carbohydrates, the complex carbs? There was starch, and let's see, there was glycogen and chitin and cellulose. Hopefully that's ringing a bell a little bit. This is the one in plant cells, cellulose, and actually chitin's going to be the one that you'll see pretty soon in fungi. So in plants, it's made out of cellulose. So the cell wall is made out of cellulose in plants. Cellulose is a bunch of glucose molecules added together in these long chains, and they look like fibers because they're these long chains and they interlock. In bacteria, it's something called peptidoglycan. So protein, peptido, and glycan, a carbohydrate. And then in fungi, it's made of chitin. So that's another of those big carbohydrates. So these are what the different cell walls are in different organisms. And protists are special because there's a million different categories of those. Okay, Hope. Okay, so we're talking about cell walls. The function is that it supports and protects the cells. It also helps it to stop it from exploding when water comes into it too fast, and I'll talk about that more in the next unit. It's found outside the cell membrane. Here's a bacterium, and you can tell because there's no membrane-bound organelles in there. Anyway, if you look at this, here's the cell membrane, or it's also called the plasma membrane. The purple thing outside of it, that's the cell wall. Okay, quiz time. The idea that all living things are composed of cells and that all cells come from other cells defines inheritance of acquired characteristics, cell theory, the laws of inheritance, organelle theory, or central dogma. The right answer there is cell theory. Which of the following cells has the smallest surface to volume ratio? Okay, so take a look at this. Here's a cell, some kind of cell, and let's say its surface area is 10 units of whatever, and let's say its volume is, I don't know, 10 units of something else, mils or something, and centimeters, whatever it is. That's a surface area to volume of 1. Now let's draw the same thing. You're going to pretend that's the same size. That's kind of bad. And I'm going to cut it in half. So let's say I put a cell membrane, on either side like this. The surface area to volume, so the surface area now is a lot bigger, right? We've added this. So let's say the surface area is more like, I don't know, is that double? Maybe not quite. Let's say it's, um, let's just do 15. And then the volume, of course, if you add them both together, is going to be 10. So you can see the volume would be the same because we're going to pretend that's the same size. And the surface area was the same, but now this is a new surface area too, so that's bigger. So anyway, surface area to volume. And so the surface area to volume ratio is 1.5. And so let's do that again. And now I've taken the same volume, but the surface area is much, much bigger now, right? So let's say it's 20. So that's a surface area to volume of 2. So the smaller you get, the bigger the surface to volume ratio is. So for example, a bacterium would have a very, very high surface area to volume ratio. That means, here's the little bacterium, it means it won't take long for stuff to diffuse in and out of it to the center, and there's a ton of spaces for diffusion to happen. Something like an ostrich egg is enormous, right? Well, actually, let's draw the real size of an ostrich egg. I don't know how big they are, but they're probably bigger than that. For something, let's pretend there's no shell. For something to diffuse from out here to way in here would take forever, and there's really not that many spots for the diffusion to happen. So this one actually has a really low surface area to volume. It's like these 3 examples. The one that's bigger actually has a lower surface area to volume. So which of the following cells has the smallest surface area to volume? It's the biggest one. And so the only thing I really want you to get, I'm not going to ask you to do math for this. All I really want you to get is the idea that you have cells that are tiny. And the reason that you want cells to be tiny, so cells, wow, we're going to pretend that says cells. Cells are tiny. The reason that they need to be tiny is so that you can you can diffuse stuff in and out of them easily enough. That's what I really, really want you to get out of that. Which of the following structures is exclusively associated with prokaryotic cells? So pro means before, karyote is nucleus. So these are bacteria. Membrane enclosed organelles, nope, 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 they don't have that. A membrane bound nucleus, nope, 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 nope. DNA is not enclosed by a membrane, that's it. Cell wall, yes, bacteria have them, but so do eukaryotes like plants. And then that says ribosomes. That makes protein, and yes, they have them, but so do a bunch of other folks. So DNA not enclosed by a membrane. Which of the following statements regarding cells is false? All cells are enclosed in a membrane that maintains internal conditions different from the surroundings. Homeostasis. They all have that, so I'm looking for false. Let me pause. I hope it doesn't get destroyed. All cells have DNA as their genetic material. That's actually true. All cells can interconvert chemical materials. That's actually true. That means you can take glucose or let's say you can take an amino acid and take the nitrogen out of it and you can convert it to glucose. That's sort of true. All cells have a cell wall. Nope, 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 nope. You don't. Your cells don't. So it's that one. A cell is exposed to a substance that prevents it from dividing. The cell becomes larger and larger. This situation should present no problem to the cell. Oh my goodness, kidding? That's not it. Will eventually lead to the cell's deterioration since functional organelles will not proportionally increase with the size of the cell. Well, maybe, maybe not. Will eventually be problematic since the cell's ability to absorb nutrients through its outer membrane will not keep increasing as quickly as the cell needs. That's totally true because The reason that cells are small is so that things can diffuse in and out of them fast enough. So it's the last one. Blank cells lack a membrane-bound nucleus. So, 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 so important. You've got to know this one. Fungal, animal, plant, prokaryote, eukaryote. That is prokaryotic. Eukaryotic are all of these. They all have a nucleus, and that's what defines prokaryotes as prokaryotes. They do not have a nucleus. You are told that the cells on a microscope slide, this came right from an MCAS, by the way, are plant, animal, or bacterial. You look at them through a microscope and see cell walls. Okay, if there's cell walls, then it's not, that would be my son. If you see cell walls, let's see, and you see cell walls. If you see cell walls, it cannot be an animal cell. And you see membrane-bound organelles, so that can't be bacterial. You conclude correctly that the cells are plants. Yay! Okay, last one. The fluid mosaic model describes the plasma membrane as consisting of a carbohydrate bilayer, nah, it's a lipid bilayer, two layers of phospholipids, there you go, with a protein sandwiched between them, nope, a phospholipid bilayer, I like that, with embedded carbohydrates and proteins that can drift in the membrane, that's it. A protein bilayer, nope, nope, no, nope, it's a lipid bilayer. So there you go. All right, adios, folks.